in this offense. Jonnu Smith, I mean, just to be quite honest with you, just does not fit the offense right now, which is kind of weird saying because everyone's like, the Jonnu Arthur Smith fit is so
Correct.
great. Well, it looks awful right now. Darnell has been the best tight end on the team. And he's been kind of coming alive as a pass catcher. I think the tight ends are going to have to be the reason that this offense cooks down the stretch. Someone has to emerge, similar to how Colston Loveland has emerged as the pass catcher too. One of those guys has to differentiate themselves, in my opinion, starting this week for this group to really be a cogent, coherent offense, because it doesn't look like one right now. They're just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what works. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Steelers Breakdown Podcast. Nick Farabaugh here with you guys, and I'm joined by a special guest, as I usually am here on these late week episodes. Today, I'm joined by EJ Snyder. If you guys are draft nicks, I feel like you know EJ. You watch Bootleg Football. I would hope you do. If you are a Bears fan, maybe you watch the Bear Era Pod. That's where EJ does his Bears stuff. How are you doing, man?
I'm good. Busy, but happy to be here. It's good to see you again. And it's always fun when teams that don't usually play each other get to play each other. And we get to do this once every 4 years or so-ish and reconnect and talk about the two teams that we really like. So I think we're going to have a ton of fun.
I do too. Me and EJ have met a few times at the Shrine Bowl, Senior Bowl, Combine, that little realm where everyone comes together for a few days every now and then. It's always a great time. But you mentioned Steelers and the Bears don't play very often. The Steelers haven't been to Chicago since 2017. I don't know if you guys remember that game. I remember that it was a bad Bears team. The Steelers lost in overtime. Absolutely bonkers game. The Steelers haven't won in Chicago, I think, since 1995. It's not been a great spot for them, but this is a completely different team, EJ, led by Caleb Williams. And that's really who I want to start talking about first, because Steelers fans probably don't know much about Caleb. I don't think, Steelers fans are watching a bunch of Chicago Bears football. Caleb this year looking pretty good. I mean, the sack avoidance is there. You see it. The time to throw, it's high, but I was talking to a Steelers player this week, and they're like, he not only extends outside the pocket, he kind of extends in the pocket. He knows how to navigate through dirty pockets and can kind of find little nuggets that are just rare to find, or he'll be able to reset and throw different launch angles. It's really impressive to kind of watch when you watch the tape. So talk to me about Caleb this year and how the marriage of that sack avoidance, his escapability, is actually fitting in with the in structure stuff that Ben Johnson obviously is drawing up to success as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because everybody was so worried coming into this season about Caleb in structure because he didn't have a lot of structure last year. Famously, head coach has been fired, but he had 4 OCs last year, which is almost unheard of. I can't think of another situation where they had 4 in 1 year. So it was a terrible situation. There was a lot of hue and cry in the offseason about the fact that they weren't coaching him the right way or not enough. It was a terrible, terrible situation. So what you ended up seeing on the field was sort of almost a schizophrenic performance where he was trying to please different people as a rookie, which is always tough. And you saw flashes, but towards the end of the year, he really sort of prioritized, I think maybe out of self-preservation, I'm just not going to throw a lot of picks here. And he actually threw a historically low number of picks for a rookie. But that also meant some conservatism. That meant holding the ball. That meant not looking like he was able to play in structure, which was not something he did a ton in college. He did do it in college, but it got overshadowed by all the hero ball, the plays outside the pocket, the incredible athleticism, all the things that people sort of were really hyped about. Coming into this year, everybody knew that Ben Johnson was under center, play action, and that Caleb had very little experience in that in any of his time in college, and not very much in the pros either. So that's a big adjustment. And other quarterbacks have gone through that. Jared Goff went through that. Matt Stafford went through that to a point. We see guys having a ton of success with it in the league now, but it's not an easy thing to do, to turn your back to the defense, turn around, get a very quick and accurate picture, and play within that structure. So everybody was really concerned about whether or not he could do that. It looked a little shaky through summer for sure. It looked even, I'll say, continued shaky through the early section, 2, 3, 4 games. Everybody was like, I'm not sure this is going to work. But Ben held the line and said he is improving. He is doing what I asked him to. And what you're seeing each and every week is that improvement. And certainly for the last month, we've seen a lot more comfort within that particular piece of the offense, which is really the bedrock of Ben's offense. It starts with the run game, and then what he wants to get to in the passing game is under center, play action, middle of the field, which is a very dangerous area. Not a lot of quarterbacks throw there a lot. And Caleb has shown so far that he is adept in doing that. And when things have broken down, yeah, the sack avoidance is superhuman. Like nobody in the league plays like him right now. You guys had Big Ben for years, and he just shucked guys off because he was a big dude. He would take these huge hits, and he just kind of, not today. And he'd go back to playing quarterback. Caleb is not a big, tall guy, but he is incredibly strong in the lower and has flexibility where he could just duck the torso and spin out of what looked to be sure sacks. Very frustrating for defenders. And he doesn't just put his head down and take off. He is always looking all the way to the sideline. He gets his eyes back up. And to what, your Steelers source said, he can do that within the pocket. He can stand back up in the pocket after the first rusher gets by. If there's not another rusher, and sometimes even when there is, he'll stay standing and make a play down the field, which is, I would say, rare for a second-year player, but he's executed that. It has led to this sort of time to throw, but as you and I know, there's tapes and stats, and you have to sort of justify with both. If you just look at the time to throw stat, it doesn't look great, but if you look at the film and what he's doing in that extra time, you're like, that's pretty special a lot of the time.
It's fun to watch. Like, this is my first time really watching Caleb outside of like live viewing since his USC tape. And it's very rare to see somebody have the skill set. It's not even, the Steelers have faced Lamar Jackson, and Lamar Jackson has Houdini moments too. But Caleb wins in a completely different way than even someone like Lamar does. It's just, it's very kind of aware. He's always got his eyes downfield on top of that. So he makes throws from spots you're like, you don't understand that he can make it. And he's not really volatile outside of structure. It's like 4 picks this year, and there's not a lot of like things left on the bone there. It's not like he's had a lot of drop picks or he's fumbling the ball a lot. Like, he's doing a great job of creating explosives outside of structure and creating things where there shouldn't be there. And in structure now, I do kind of want to talk about this passing game, just kind of the overall arcing philosophy of it. You talk about Caleb, it seems like he's uncorked almost another like squeeze of the toothpaste with his arm strength. Some of these tight window throws he's making with anticipation. People were like, does he really have the arm to make the tight window throws? I think he's more than proven he has. And I don't think that was really a question I had, but he's certainly proving that. And he has a connection, it feels like, with his 2 tight ends. They have a nice kind of set of weapons that he utilizes at wide receiver. Talk to me about this philosophy in the passing game and how Caleb is really just adept at working in the play action, because it has felt like an evolution for him this year.
100%. Ben Johnson's offense, obviously very much different than anything he experienced last year under those 4 OCs. And Waldron just didn't seem to have a plan. The spacing was terrible. The utilization was something we questioned throughout the year in terms of which receiver was being put into which role. It almost seemed like they were trying to put the worst possible fit in each role and really play away from guys' strengths. And that seemed almost completely backwards. So, Ben came in, made his assessment off tape and talking to these guys and having played against a bunch of them, and said, look, this is what I think you do well. And we see that alignment first and foremost. Like, the right players are in the right spots to try and do the right things. Spacing is obviously very much better. He's a stickler for timing. We love to say that he's a psycho in the best possible way. He is hyper focused on the detail on offense and holding that standard and saying, look, if we play it this way, you've seen the results. And people forget, recency bias, that it took half to 2/3 of a year in Detroit before it started to click. Dan Campbell had to come out and, have his owner come and say, no, Dan's great. Get off him. He'll be fine. This was a big job. It was never going to be done in half a season. And Ben's offense sort of followed that several months after in suit and really started to heat up at the end of the first year. By the second year, it was clicking, and a lot of the players have said as much. The first year was about learning the language, learning the expectations, learning the mechanics of how it all fits together. And then in the second year, they could start to exploit that and go, look, we know how the thing works. Like, where do we turn the levers on the machine to really, exploit defenses now that we understand it? And that took a year. Even really smart functional players, Amon-Ra St. Brown said that, Jared Goff said that. So you see that with Ben. The fact that he's already got the Bears playing as a top 10 offense in under half a year is damn near a miracle in Chicago. That's pretty ridiculous, especially considering the system that Caleb came from and the experience he had as a rookie, neither of which were ideal for what he was going into. So you've got Rome as the number one, the clear number one. Caleb's connection with Rome is very good. They haven't hit all those balls, but they talk every day about how to make that better. And you can see that improvement. You can really see that communication that you have between great receiver. I don't care whether it's tight end, receiver, or whatever, quarterback combos where they're starting to kind of read each other's mind. And when something breaks down or the space moves in a certain way, they have that understanding. People call it chemistry. A lot of it's just time spent. He and Rome are probably the best two at that in this offense. But as you said, there's a lot of other weapons. DJ has been used kind of like a Debo. They've been putting him in the backfield some, run with that. They wanted to get him. They're run with catch yards for sure. It's been a little more hit and miss. The connection necessarily isn't there, but I think the usage again is correct. Third wide receiver, Zacchaeus started out there, and I thought started off very well and then got a case of the drops. Boy, he just sort of developed the yips. So that's opened the door a little bit for the rookie, Luther Burden, who had some drops of his own, but has made some very nice catches in tough spots. And the big development is Colston Loveland, was dinged up at the beginning of the year and is now really coming on and has that connection and has that skill set. And more importantly, Ben trusts him. Even when he was only getting one or two looks a game, sometimes they were very high leverage looks at the end of games in high pressure situations where you wouldn't expect him to lean on a rookie and say, all right, Rook, it's come to you. Like, you got to get us out of this. He was already doing that. So now that the volume's been cranked up, he hasn't gone away from that. If anything, he's leaned into it. And we've seen Colston really bail the Bears out several times and I think he's becoming truly like wide receiver 2 in this offense, or just passing option 2 in this offense. And then you got the backs. You got DeAndre Swift, who's good in the passing game, and Kyle Monangai, who I think is not great in the passing game. He's good in the short passing game, but has been a revelation between the tackles, and I actually wish they'd use him there more. So when you have all those pieces together and a quarterback that, like you said, keeps his eyes up and will find the open guy, it can be very difficult to defend, because even if one route doesn't work out, even if one guy gets stuck at the line of scrimmage, there are going to be 2 or 3 other options, and Caleb will find them.
The Steelers are an interesting secondary, to say the least. They are figuring themselves out too. And we're going to switch over gears here, because the Steelers have, when you think of Steelers, you think single high defense, cover 1, cover 3. Last 3 weeks, not necessarily have been them. They have switched gears when Ramsey moved to free safety. Kyle Duggar has come in. They ran a bunch of cover 6 to beat the Colts, and that worked like a charm. They then went back to their blitz-heavy man coverage scheme against Justin Herbert and the Chargers, and then this past week, blitzed Joe Flacco only 14% of the time. Split safety looks 72% of the time. Bunch of quarters. It's been different. This ain't the same Steelers scheme, and it's kind of fun. I'm interested to see what they're going to come out with this week in terms of defending the passing game. They also just have to figure out the personnel. Is it Darius Slay? Is it James Pierre? Is it Asante Samuel Jr.? Who is it going to be? So there's a lot of things to figure out. But the run game is where I really kind of want to focus next, because this Bears run game, I mean, you look at the explosives they get out of this stretch, outside zone, heavy thing with DeAndre Swift is doing a great job winning on the perimeter. They're doing a nice job kind of blocking, it seems like, in the run game. And it's working off the play action stuff that you're seeing. It's not always the run game opening up the passing game either. There have been some instances, I think, at least on tape, where it's been the opposite from what I've seen. But the Steelers running a bunch of too high has kind of been the thing. They've run a bunch of split safety looks, and they've been able to defend the run out of that. That has been their revelation. No one has knocked them out of it yet. How do you see this Bears rushing attack matching up against what the Steelers do up front, especially now that the Steelers seem to be kind of joining a little bit of the too high wave? This is something I didn't see coming, but it's a new development and a welcome one for them.
Yeah, again, his personnel changes, going out and getting Kyle Duggar. Kyle Duggar is a guy that can make this work, especially playing in that, you can call it whatever you want. You can call him a box safety. You can call him a star. He's played there a lot, certainly did in New England. And you need safeties in too high against the run who can play the run from depth. They have to run the alley, whether they're the short safety or the tall safety, doesn't really matter. If they're equal, they are going to be coming from about 12 yards away at the closest. And that means quick identification. That's probably the biggest deal. And then not getting caught up in the wash. You have to force the issue as a safety, or else there's going to be a hole in your run fit. So the Bears' explosive plays on runs largely come from outside runs in concept. Almost about a third more explosives come out of the outside run concepts than the inside run concepts. And that's not so much a factor of the offense. I know that's strange to say. It's a factor of DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift is exceptionally good on the edges and in space. He's also very good in the passing game. His vision between the tackles is quite limited. There are lots of, especially end zone all 22 examples where you go, oh, buddy, did you not see that gaping hole to the right? Why did you run into the back of the left guard? When he gets outside, that kind of disappears. He just sees it better out there, and he's still a very explosive athlete. So in terms of those explosives, if you're going to play the outside run game from too high, first thing you got to do is set the edge consistently. I think the Steelers have the personnel to do it. And you have to do it with a step. You have to do it with an outside step to basically force that outside run farther outside. You can't give them the choice to cut back earlier. You're limiting your upfield cut lanes and pushing them farther outside, which is where you should have help. Next guy in line there is the safety. Has to run the alley from depth, has to identify the play quickly and correctly. He has to understand that. Yes, he has to guard against cutbacks, but that's not really his run. He's filling that next gap over from the guy setting the edge. And then you really have to lean on your corners. And so you have to play a little bit of zone or off man, because if you're playing tight man, which is turn and run, as soon as that play goes off and they turn and run with the receiver, there's nobody on the outside to shut it off. So if you get a pull blocker or somebody that can take on that safety in space, you've got a guy running away from the play, and DeAndre Swift will exploit that for 7, 8, 9, 10 yards all the time before that corner can turn around, come down and get him. Or if you've got a receiver like Rome, you got to deal with him as a physical force blocking. He's a big guy. He certainly learned how to block at Washington. It's been up and down in the pros, but when he gets on a guy, that's when you see those big explosive plays. Is, the edge gets set decently. I think the offensive line, obviously a big factor in sort of how it was retooled, has really started to come together. There were fits and starts, but Tooney's been great the whole year. Darnell Wright's been great the whole year. Dahlman, I think, is coming off his best game of the year. This is probably where the Steelers wish they played the Bears about a month ago when things were still quite not sorted on the offensive line. And same thing with Jonah Jackson. Jonah Jackson started off very slow, and everybody said, oh, man, he was injured with the Rams. He's cooked. He's come on the last 2 or 3 games. They've been his best games as well. So now you've got 4 out of 5 guys across the front of the offensive line. And Theo Bennett, the young left tackle, is a really good run blocker. He's athletic and he can get on guys. Pass blocking, he can overcommit a little bit. He's still young there, so I think the Steelers probably take advantage of that. But when it gets blocked up, and Ben's very good at getting those guys taken care of, Swift only has to beat one guy outside. So you got to play with discipline, and all 3 of those sort of guys left to right in the gaps have to do their thing. Got to set a good edge. Steelers can do that. Got a guy like Duggar who can fill that next hole. He showed the ability to do that over and over again. And then you got to get those corners a little bit of help, or just play them a little bit off or with outside leverage so they can just look at the quarterback for a minute and identify, no, that's run, and get into the blocker, try and defeat it, and really sort of bottle that up on the outside. If you do that, I think the Steelers can play the run pretty well. If that breaks down, even in the second half, because the Bears will continue to try it. They are not a team that's going to go away from the run. Ben's never going to do that. You're going to have to play it that way for, a better part of 60 minutes, because like you said, sometimes even though it might be the pass opening it up, they're going to come back to it and gash you with it.
100%. And that's why the Steelers' corner personnel this week is particularly of interest to me. James Pierre, I don't know, EJ, if you've watched the Bengals tape. James Pierre has come out of nowhere and has played pretty good football. And he's been very
about
physical.
Nowhere. I called him out a couple of weeks ago on Bootleg. I was like, occasionally you're digging through and you just find a guy that maybe doesn't have a ton of snaps, but man, he's doing a lot with the snaps he has. And it's either 2 or 3 weeks ago, it might be 3 weeks ago now. And I said, heads up, James Pierre, not super well used necessarily in the Steelers defense, but when he comes in for those, I think at that point he had 60 or 70 coverage snaps. I was like, he's getting it done. And I can see his workload increasing, and here we are.
Yep, Slay is back from a concussion, but I have a sneaking suspicion we are going to see a lot of James Pierre. I'm just going to say that. Um, there's one play against the Bengals where it is clearly a bracket. Ramsey is guarding the crosser and gets caught flat-footed. Chase cuts it upfield, and it doesn't matter because good old James Pierre is right in the hip pocket, batting it away. Just a really impressive surge from him. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how that works. I'm interested to see how Joey Porter Jr. tackles. He's hit or miss. Who knows? Brandon Eccles in the slot, a little bit of a concern for me. Duggar and Ramsey, though, have tackled very well from depth. That's honestly what has saved them sometimes in this run defense. They'll allow 7 or 8 sometimes, but they're not allowing 15, 20. And I think that's been the big thing for them. So let's keep it up front. You talk about the O-line kind of breaking it down. Honestly, the matchup I'm most looking forward to just watching back on tape when I watch this back on Monday is the Steelers' defensive line against the Bears' O-line, because you got TJ Watt against Darnell right in there. You talk about Theo Bennett, Nick Herbig, and Alex Highsmith, 2 really good players. And then you got this interior. I just think it's going to be really fun. Cam Hayward, Keanu Benton is playing the best football, in my opinion, of his football career right now. He has come on as a pass rusher, and he's been much more kind of consistent as a run defender. You'll detonate him once or twice a game, but otherwise he's actually become much more consistent. And then you got Derek Harmon, who is just a really solid rock for them. Talk to me about this matchup, because I think this is going to be a real fun one. The Steelers' defensive line, their edges, and their interior defensive line against what I think is a really surging Bears offensive.
Yeah, Steelers, I think defensive line probably got there first. They, didn't generate a lot of pass rush over the early part of the season, and then they came on, but that was a while ago now, and they've been doing it through the middle part of the season. 3rd best in sacks created per game in the league. I think all Steelers fans kind of know that and just are used to that position of like, hey, we're back to where we should be. Okay. Bears offensive line has been a wreck for years. They have been through multiple iterations, multiple offensive line coaches. None of it's worked. They've allowed a ton of pressure. Ben coming in, this is a hill I'll die on. I was not in those meetings and I am not privy to any inside information. I cannot imagine that Ben Johnson came into that interview and said anything other than, if I show up here, we're fixing the offensive line. And I'm sure they were like, yeah. And he was like, no, we're fixing the offensive line. We're going to do it. We're not going to say we're going to do it. We're not going to say, oh, we spent our picks and look what happened. We are fixing it, because if we don't fix it, I'm used to having a very good offensive line coming from Detroit. They built a young, strong offensive line there early in his tenure, and he really leveraged. That was kind of the rock he built his church on, and I'm sure he looked at what had happened in Chicago and said, not good enough. And as a result, they literally rebuild the entire line. We're talking about 4 out of 5 new starters. Wright is the only one left, and Wright's been playing extremely well with one arm. I might bring up his elbow is wrecked, and he's been playing in a brace, and you wouldn't know it. He dropped Brian Burns one-handed against the Giants. Like, Brian Burns jumped up and Darnell Wright knocked him down with one arm and was like, yeah, he is incredibly strong. He's been playing very, very well. Like I said, Joe Thuney, still Joe Thuney. Don't have to worry about him at all. He's playing at an extremely high level. Dahlman and Jackson took a little while to get going. I think Dahlman is truly understanding. It came from an outside zone scheme, but I think he's truly understanding both what Ben wants and what the guys on either side of him want. We know that's so important for offensive line play. You're only as strong as your weakest. So it's going to be really interesting. I would go even farther and say the inside battle between all the guys you mentioned, Benton, Harmon, Hayward, Thuney, Dahlman, Jackson, is really going to be where the sausage gets made in this game, both in the run game and the pass game. Like, whoever gets the better of more of those matchups. I don't think anybody's going to win all of them because there's just too much talent on both sides and the other side gets paid too. But you're going to get to see some really fun reps. Guys like Brandon Thorne, who's a steady line player, are going to be digging into the middle of this one and watching it very, very closely, because you're going to be watching, guys who are at the top of their craft right now, really going after against guys on the other side who are the same way.
Yeah, it should be fun. And I think the thing is, the Steelers absolutely crushed a Colts offensive line that I think has played exceptional this year. And nobody saw that coming just because the Steelers, that was in the lull of the Steelers pass rush. And then these past 3 games, it has come alive again. And Herbig has been having a breakout season. So if there's anywhere I'm thinking the Steelers are going to try and exploit, it would be Theo Bennett against Nick Herbig. I think Herbig has been just such a delight to watch. I mean, what a steal of a 4th-round pick he has turned into in terms of him putting on the turbo jets every time I see him. And then he's just so quick on the interior too, because they will line him up over the interior. And that's actually one thing I'm really excited to see. Steelers have a 3 outside linebacker package, and Herbig is the interior rusher, and he has made some guys look absolutely silly this year. So should be fun to watch that. But let's flip to the other side of the football now. The Bears defense, which hasn't been as sterling as the offense. The tape is certainly interesting to watch in the pass game. The run defense is everywhere. The injuries are many. We don't know who's going to play. Jalen Johnson logged a full practice today, so maybe they'll get their best player back. But then their top 3 on inside linebackers are injured and might not play in this game. Kyler Gordon, will he play? I don't know. This is a banged up team. But just give me kind of an overview snapshot of this story, because it seems like when you watch it, it's touchdown, field goal, turnover, and those are the 3 outcomes. It's not. Rarely do they like force punts. Rarely do I see them force a punt. And they are plus 16 in turnover differential, and if you look at the interception stats, they're all there. So it's an opportunistic but gettable defense. But what in the world is going on? Is it just injuries? Is it coaching? A Dennis Allen group looking like this is not usually what I would expect from a Dennis Allen.
True. Very true. And I think that is the feeling in Chicago as well is, hey, everybody was talking this guy up. Again, Chicago fans that, maybe didn't watch a lot of Dennis Allen as a defensive coordinator or head coach. He has certain things that he likes in his defense and that he's used to. And I think he was very excited about working with Jalen Johnson, because that was is one of his tenets, one of his pillars in his defense is he always loves having a physical man corner who is very close to shutdown. Shutdown is a hard thing to be, or lockdown is a very hard thing to be, but somebody he can turn over the number 1 passing threat on an offense to and say, okay, in this case, Jalen, he's done it with Marshawn Lattimore in the past and many others, where he can basically say, all right, that guy's yours. That side of the field is yours. I'm going to use all the rest of my secondary pieces, however many I have in a given defense, to cover everything else. But I don't have to worry about that 1, that 3rd, whatever it is. And he hasn't had that all year, because Jalen Johnson, who is easily the Bears' best defender front to back, and that is over, Montez Sweat, Edmonds, everybody else. Like, Jalen Johnson is the guy that has played at the highest level in the Bears defense for a long time. It's been out basically the entire year. I think he is going to play in this one. I think this is going to be his first game back. Kyler Gordon, more up in the air, but we've seen the value of Kyler Gordon. And this is a train I was on, 5 weeks ago before he came back the first time from injury and got hurt. I said, man, when Kyler Gordon comes back, this defense is going to be very different, because the other thing that Dennis Allen really likes to do is have that roving star nickel, forced player in the run. He did it with a Honey Badger before. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson has been a nice fill-in guy that was on the couch, but can play that kind of shiftable nickel dime backer role, depending on the defense, go forward in the run fit, be a force. And without Kyler, the whole thing kind of fell apart, because it was just, it's just one injury, but it really wasn't. It's almost like 2 guys being injured, because Kyler is so versatile, multiple, and really effective, came into his own. So if he comes back along with Jalen, it is a whole different matchup for the Steelers offense to go against. If it's just Jalen, again, you're going to have to sort of pick and choose your spots, because largely whoever's gone against Jalen in the past, and look, he goes against Justin Jefferson twice a year. He's gone against everybody that's been through the North in the Packers realm. He shuts them all down. So you can kind of take one off the board if he's on it. But the run defense is, I love your analogy. They don't force many punts. It's either big win or big loss, and you'll see it. They'll defend the run very, very well and look smothering, and then they'll allow 7 yards right through the B gap. And it's back-to-back plays. And you're like, what, guys, where's the consistency? Linebackers is going to be very interesting in this one, because yes, all 3 of their linebackers were on the Wednesday injury report did not plays. I haven't seen today's, so I don't know how if at all that's progressing. It had better because they don't have a ton of depth behind those guys. It's already getting down there. Noah Sewell's played very well against the run and very poorly against the pass. So if Noah Sewell ends up playing a lot, whenever who's playing quarterback for the Steelers sees him on the field, they're going to be audibly to pass, right? They're going to be trying to exploit an inside matchup versus Noah Sewell because, again, very good coming downhill. We see linebackers like this in the league, and many of them have thrived for a long time. Sewell has struggled against the pass. So the interior is going to be tough, but really, I don't think it's coaching. Dennis Allen just hasn't been able to do what he likes to do. And look, it's not like they didn't line up the corners. They were, your starting lineup would have been Jalen Johnson, Tyreek Stevenson, who is a Dennis Allen corner through and through, as far as I'm concerned. Terrell Smith would have been backing them up. Kyler at the slot. They drafted Zay Frazier in the 5th round, who's a big, lanky rookie who looked to have some potential. So Jalen's hurt for the whole year. Tyreek's missed a bunch of games. Terrell Smith goes out before the year with ACL. Zay Frazier off the field for the whole year because of something else going on off the field. So they're not going to have him at all. And then Kyler's missed most of the year. He's only played 3 or 4 games. Like, what do you do when your entire cornerback rotation plus backups gets erased? Nobody's going to look great. And I think the Bears have held that off as well as they can, but they're very vulnerable. You see it. Like, you saw the Nashawn Wright interception last week, and boy, that was great. But what they didn't show you was all the long completions against Nashawn Wright, the other corners. Like, they just can't hold up for a whole game without a pass rush, kind of like the Steelers. And spoiler alert, they don't have a pass rush like the Steelers.
Yeah. So I'll tell you this. The inside linebacker report is not good. TJ Edwards, Tremaine Edmonds, and Noah Sewell, all DNPs today. So 2 straight DNPs for all 3 of them, which means
be rough.
Ruben Hippolyte starting.
Boy,
I don't know. So
I mean, gotta be.
It's gotta be, right? I mean, but this is where the next question that I want to talk about really becomes interesting, because the Steelers are on the 6th O-line, really 7 offensive line revolution, because Darnell Washington's 311 pounds and is an absolute cyborg. And they're going to bring in Spencer Anderson, who's another 320 pounds. And if you don't have your top 3 inside linebackers, how do you defend against this big package with Jaylen Warren and Kenny Gainwell running? This is the biggest kind of matchup to me of the game, because the Steelers, I think, regardless of if it's Rudolph or Rodgers with one hand, are going to want to run the ball in this game, naturally, to take pressure off that quarterback. And that heavy personnel, I think, is going to be a big part of it. So talk to me about how you have the Bears. One, the Bears really haven't seen, I think, this heavy. I'm not sure how you could. Darnell Washington is a unicorn through and through. But how in the world does this matchup work for this Bears team, given just how heavy the Steelers are going to go? Not only do they go, really essentially 7 offensive linemen, then they bring in DK Metcalf, who has shown actually consistent effort as a blocker. Ben Skowronek is a 220-pound, hard-nosed guy that just relishes digging out a box safety. I mean, it's a heavy personnel.
This is my favorite question of the whole show, because there's so many connections here and things that influence this. You brought up DK, and I'll just remind you, DK's dad was a guard for the Bears. So he knows all about blocking, but there are so many connections here. You talk about how heavy this package is, and maybe the Bears haven't seen it. Well, guess who loves heavy run packages? Ben Johnson. Like, Ben Johnson used 6 offensive linemen more than almost anybody else in the league last year. And he has his dedicated blocking tight end, who is a tight end in name only for the most part. He is not a receiving threat, right? So he too has 6 and sometimes 7 guys that he can roll out and roll over people with, and he really likes it. So whether or not the Bears can do that on offense is a different thing entirely, but he can help his defense, I think, uniquely get ready to play that, because, again, he's been employing that for the last couple of years with great regard. So he is not at all unfamiliar with the concept, whether or not they use it on offense. And I think the Bears are going to zig here, not only because of personnel. I actually think they would have done it had they had their linebackers even. So You brought up a really interesting point earlier about Nick Herbig, right? Nick Herbig, not the biggest guy, but they don't always play him on the outside. They play him on the inside. Why? Because he's quicker than guards. He can embarrass people with his quickness. Now he's got good power and whatever else, but he doesn't have great size. We're talking about big versus little here. So it's not just size. And I think the Bears and Dennis Allen specifically, because of the way this matchup is shaping up, but also because I think it gives them an advantage, are going to go dime. They're going to use CJ Gardner-Johnson as a dime backer, and they're going to try and out quick. They're going to try and be the Nats, right? They're going to try and get 3 or 4 guys tangled up in the blockers and the running backs' legs and just slow it down that way, because when the Steelers do that, when they go big, they are trying to influence the defense. They're trying to say, we're going big, so you have to go big. And a lot of teams will. They'll try and go big on big and out big them. And I don't think you're going to do that against the Steelers. So I think Dennis Allen's smart enough to see that and say, you want me to go big? I'm actually going to go small and fast. Because that's all I've got. All my linebackers are half dead. But I've got a bunch of guys, especially if Kyler comes back here, because he's a good tackler as well. You get CJ Gardner-Johnson on one side, Kyler on the other, and you get a bunch of tall, rangy, fast guys that can run around those blocks, much like Herbig does on the inside against guards, using quickness rather than pure up size and strength. I think that kind of swarm mentality is how they're going to try and defeat it, because I think they know even before all the linebacker injuries, probably can't just stand up and go paw to paw with these guys.
It's an interesting thing because the Colts did this with Kenny Moore, and it worked.
Mm-hmm.
And they just stayed nickel all game. Now, we haven't seen a team go full dime against it. That'll be interesting to see. But there has been a proven thing of success. Then, of course, the Chargers and the Bengals decided to go size for size, and sometimes that went to mixed results. So I'm actually fascinated to see how this goes, and honestly what Arthur Smith would kind of counter with, because the Steelers, and I think, kind of keeping on this topic, the limiting factor the Steelers offense is going to have all year regardless of it is, one, Broderick Jones has been Broderick Jones. It's been a roller coaster.
Yeah.
And then two, the wide receiver play outside of Metcalf is just, it's not going to be up to stuff. Calvin Austin has done some nice things, and so has Roman Wilson. But these guys are not legitimate number 2 options. And Darnell and Muth have kind of tried to fill in the gaps, and Kenny Gainwell and Jalen Warren have. So if they see dime all game, the Steelers, especially if Jalen Johnson plays and that essentially negates Metcalf, it's going to be an interesting thing. How do the Steelers throw the football in this game? Like, that's, I think, going to be the question of the kind of entire episode. But let's talk about quarterback. So Aaron Rodgers with a wrist brace versus Mason Rudolph with 2 good hands. We'll see who starts. I'm leaning towards it being Rodgers for the obvious reasons. I think he wants to play in Chicago one more time. I think he enjoys trying to antagonize the Chicago crowd. I just think it's something Aaron Rodgers relishes. We know Aaron Rodgers loves playing here. The differences in these two guys this year has been interesting. Rodgers very much was quick game early in the year, but the last 2 or 3 games, he's holding onto the ball trying to find the big play because he's not dumb. He understands if you throw quick game all game and you don't have an intermediate or a deep passing offense, which the Steelers have not had really all year, teams are just going to play down, take away the quick passing game, focusing on the run game. And so Rodgers has been pushing for the big play, and it's led to some sacks and hits on him, even though the O-line's held up. Rudolph, meanwhile, he doesn't do a lot well, but he's a point guard, kind of statue in the pocket, and he'll rip the sideline one-to-ones, and he's pretty good at it. So talk to me what you think kind of stylistically these two quarterbacks different, and how specifically against this Dennis Allen defense, how those two will be different and how you see maybe it playing out differently through the air.
Yeah, I don't know that it matters a lot. There are differences for sure. They're not the same player and they don't have the same strengths, but overall, given both how they've played this year and where they're at physically, I don't know that it changes the outlook. I don't know if you're the Bears defense that you're rooting for one or the other hardcore. I think you have advantages and disadvantages against both, probably more advantages than you do disadvantages at this point. But Aaron Rodgers in Chicago is just an energized genie out of the bottle. He always has been. So I think if you're the Steelers, you're probably hoping Aaron plays just because of his experience. And there isn't really anything that Dennis Allen's going to throw at him, dime or otherwise, that he hasn't seen. So when you get down to that, like how they've played recently and how they've played overall, when I did the deep dive on Rodgers just to see where he's at currently, stack of the whole year. I like the fact that you split it because he has played differently recently, although the results haven't necessarily been beneficial. Certainly for him, he's taken a lot more hits, and there's only so many hits in there when you're his age. So yards per attempt, he is tied. This is among quarterbacks with 50 dropbacks. That was my limiting line. So yards per attempt, he's 26th. He's tied with Tua. A-Dot, this is the one, average depth of target. He's tied for 41st in the league with Dylan Gabriel. So incredibly short distance, and he has been basically counting on yards after catch to make everything go. Adjusted completion percentage, he's 18th. He's in the middle. Drops, he's actually tied for 9th with Geno, 14. Again, you've watched the Steelers wide receiver core. You understand this. Big time throw percentage, which is an area where he has excelled throughout his career because even though the legs might have gone a little bit, he still has exceptional arm talent and anticipation. This year, tied for 24th with Bryce Young, only 3.5%. And his pressure to sack percentage, this is the one that's surging. It is the 10th highest in the league. 21% of pressures turn into sacks with Aaron because he can't get away anymore. And he doesn't want to stand in and take a hit. So delivering that last minute down the field, dagger, over the top of the defense, which he has done with a flick of the wrist for his entire career, isn't happening. He is a tick slow on getting that out, and that's too much. So overall, his NFL passer rating 13th at 97.7. So he hasn't played terribly, but he's played a very certain style. Again, to your point, he's trying to change that style, but now he's injured. And honestly, against the Chargers, he looked very much like a guy that did not want to take any contact. And the bottom line is, no matter how carefully you play in this league, no matter how good your offensive line is, no matter how good your play caller is, you're going to take contact playing quarterback, and you can't do it well without it. It's not just I'm a tough guy thing. It's not, putting your head down 15 yards downfield and running into a linebacker. We're not talking about that. Just staying in the pocket. You're going to get beat up. And he very much looks like a guy that doesn't want to get beat up anymore. And that takes a certain segment of plays where Arthur Smith is hoping he's going to stand in the pocket and deliver, sort of off the table.
100%. And here's the thing with Aaron, and I've had this discussion before on this channel. He's making this offensive line kind of look worse than it is in pass pro right now. But Broderick Jones, fully well, we know Broderick Jones gets beat very easily. But the other four, Fautanu's played well, McCormick's played well, Frazier, Sayamalo, they played well. And sometimes when Rodgers has been hunting big play here, he'll turn down some spots, especially in that Chargers game. There are some turn downs that you're like, Aaron Rodgers is turning that down? It's weird sometimes. And then there are other times when he does spin the ball, and I think this is what he has lost with his arm. He's lost his downfield accuracy in a lot of ways. It has not looked pretty. When the ball goes 15 yards or more, the ball is spraying all over the place. And so they're just avoiding the middle of the field right now. And it's 6 percentage points lower than it was last year. Now, some of that's offensive design. That's a Mike Tomlin thing, I think, in a large part. They do not. We know Mike Tomlin. If you hear him ever speak in a press conference, it's about turnovers, not creating. It's about creating turnovers and not turning the ball over. Well, if you don't want to turn the ball over, we talked about this earlier with Caleb and how that has kind of been a feature of his game, that he's not been able to turn the ball over a lot by throwing in the middle field. Well, the Steelers just say, we're perimeter, flat, underneath. It's not going to target that area of the field. So that's going to be something that's fascinating. And Rodgers is trying to open it up, and he's pressing. Like, it just looks like a quarterback that's pressing. He doesn't have the wide receiver talent or the pass catcher talent that's going to open things up. And there are just plays guys are plastered. I mean, it is that simple. And so you're seeing him push a lot. And so I'm interested to see how this works, because even in the Bengals game, before he went out, I mean, they scored 10 points at the half against the Bengals. The Bengals defense is off.
All-time bad right now.
It's all-time bad. The Chargers defense is very well coached, and I respect Jesse Minter a lot, but you shouldn't look as bad as Rodgers did against that defense. The Colts game, they scored 27, but mainly because the defense gives them short field after short field. 5 turnovers forced in that game. I mean, the Packers game, he had some similar things too. It's just been a struggle to watch Rodgers at times this year. And Rudolph came in and point guarded the offense. I mean, he had 2.7 ADOT, so you take with that what you will. But
Yep.
the Steelers are doing what they are doing. So keeping on that, we talked about quick passing game. This is the Steelers' MO this year. They killed the Bengals with it because the Bengals can tackle. And I have not seen a worse linebacker this year than Barrett Carter. But Kenny Gainwell took him to the woodshed all day. And so did Darnell Washington. And this quick passing game has been something of sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. How did the Bears respond to this? I think this, you look at the film, this kind of plays into what the Bears want, I think, in a lot of ways. You look at the downfield passing, that's where they've gotten beat. And so how do you see this passing game? Can the Steelers open up a quick passing game at all against this Bears team? They're going to try rollout, play action. I'm sure they're going to try and hit some of those slant routes to DK and others that they've tried to hit. But I have a hard time seeing this quick passing game get going.
Yeah, it's going to be a struggle because it's funny, when you can make that work is when you can do the other thing. If you have the threat, again, you don't necessarily have to hit them, but if you have the threat of opening it up down the sideline, deep middle, bank 7, whatever, you can get the quick passing game going because it's no different than using the run game to suck in linebackers and make space for the intermediate passing game. You can use the deep passing game to open up the short passing game. And if you don't have the deep passing game, you can't, because the defense is going to sit right over the top of everything, and they're not going to play scared down the field, which means they can compress space. They can hang out in passing lanes. They can create those tips and overthrows that Tomlin doesn't want to see. And again, if you know he's not going to target the middle of the field, you can leave it alone. You can leave one defender in the middle of the field covering the entire alley from 5 yards to infinity yards if you know they're not going to be there, and really sort of pack into those passing areas, 15 yards and in from the sidelines to the numbers, and just make it very crowded and difficult to get anybody anything. You're going to get some passes, but you're not going to get the yards after catch that they need to make this offense kind of go and stay on the field. They're just going to rally and tackle. And if they go with those smaller lineups, that's going to be the mantra, is get guys to the ball, because we cannot have one guy, Roman Wilson or anybody else, break a tackle and go for an extra 25 and keep a drive alive. We don't care if he goes for 7. We don't care if he goes for 8, because they're going to have to come right back and do it again. And it's going to be 3 or 4 or 5. And we're just going to continually kind of press down. And if we're not worried about the retaliation, which is that over our head thing that scares us, that makes us back up, that makes us give cushion, that makes all those things underneath open up, you're kind of one way. And anytime you're forced into being one way as an offense, it's very difficult. You basically have to hope for miracles for success.
You really do. And I think the key to this game, if the Steelers are going to get a downfield passing game going, especially if the linebackers are hurt, it's going to be up the seam. Like, I think that's kind of where it's going to have to be. Freiermuth, Washington, Jonnu, like that. That's where, or you can maybe get Gainwell and Warren out of the backfield. They have been very good at doing that. They've run some Texas routes, some different things, wheel routes going. They have been heavily featured, but the Steelers haven't featured Freiermuth nearly enough, I think, in this offense. Jonnu Smith, I mean, just to be quite honest with you, just does not fit the offense right now, which is kind of weird saying, because everyone's like, the Jonnu Arthur Smith fit is so
Correct.
great. Well, it looks awful right now. Darnell has been the best tight end on the team. And he's been kind of coming alive as a pass catcher, but I think the tight ends are going to have to be the reason that this offense cooks down the stretch. Someone has to emerge, similar to how Colston Loveland has emerged as the pass catcher too. One of those guys has to differentiate themselves, in my opinion, starting this week, for this group to really be a cogent, coherent offense, because it doesn't look like one right now. They're just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what works.
It does seem disjointed when you watch the Steelers offensive tape. You talked about watching the Bears defensive tape and kind of going, what is this? What are these guys? What do they do well? What can they do consistently? And the answer is not much. They can do lots of things well, but they can't do a lot of things consistently. The Steelers offense feels a bit of the same way. You will see times when Aaron's in rhythm, releases the ball on time. DK wins his one-on-one. Roman Wilson's played better over the last couple of weeks in that, whatever you want to call it, overall pass catcher 3 role, wide receiver 2, like I wide receiver or pass catcher 4, maybe if you're looking at this offense, but like you'll see them hit the occasional route to Freiermuth. Like you said, Freiermuth, one of my favorite players coming out as a tight end. And I keep thinking, man, there's more there than they're using, but that's true of a lot of players in a lot of offensive systems. And you see them roll a little bit in certain games and you think, uh-oh, now they're getting scary. And then literally next play, next series, they can't do basic things. And the drive stalls and they're off the field. Aaron's doing that classic grab the chin strap, snap it off, shake his head. You're seeing a lot of that this year because continuity has been tough to come by. You have success, but he knows that stringing those plays together is what wins football games. That's been very hard.
Yeah, and we'll see what they can do because tough alley coming down. Bears start it. Bills, Ravens, Lions. It's not easy. So Pittsburgh's got to figure this out. EJ, thanks for coming on. Tell them where they can follow you, watch your work, all that great stuff.
Sure. So I'm on Twitter /X and Blue Sky at Football EJ on both of those. Twice a week, you'll see me on Bootleg Football, my podcast on YouTube with Brett Coleman. And then once a week, I do have a dedicated Bears show, which has been on Wednesdays for the last several weeks called Bear Era, also on YouTube. We have a lot of fun talking about the previous game and the next game. We also do a nice little roundup with a bunch of our friends from the NFC North so that we get to rub their noses in it when we have Arif do the Vikings. Nick does our Detroit Lions stuff. And the great Tom Grossi comes on and is good enough to bless us with his presence and talk about the Packers this year, which has been a lot of fun because he was expecting a lot of victory laps and he hasn't gotten all.
Make sure to check all that stuff out, guys. As for me, follow me on Twitter at Farabaugh. You can check out the stuff at penlive.com/Steelers. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thanks for watching, everybody. And we will be back on Saturday.